Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another edition of Pointcast with me, Li Xin. I'm based here in the Chinese capital, Beijing, and I'm very glad to have, for the very first time on my program, Mr. Mushahid Hussain Sayed, who is a very respected senator from Pakistan, and he's also former Minister of Information and Culture of Pakistan. At this moment, of course, we all understand that a lot has been happening in Pakistan, and likely and hopefully more will come as the situation in the ground in the Middle East continues to develop at a very fast pace. But before we go into the conversation, I'd just like to ask our viewers from around the world, if you find the topic interesting, if you find the conversation helpful, would you please press that subscribe button? I really do need that as a great encouragement. And I check the comments. I see whether you like it, you like our discussion or not, and what suggestions you have, possibly criticism. Please make sure that you leave them under the video so that I can see them. I'll read each and every one of them, although I do not respond to each and every one of them. I do read them, and I'll take them and I'll note them, and so that I can improve my conversation. So a big thank you on behalf of the whole team. And a big thank you on behalf of all the other people who may be watching this video, because with your support, we'll hopefully continue to do a much better job. So a big thank you in advance, and let's get started with the conversation. Senator Hussain Sayed, thank you so much, and welcome to the Pointcast.
Thank you, my pleasure.
We are 13th of April. We are about, a day after the talks failed to produce any outcome between the US delegation and the Iranian delegation in Islamabad. The talks supposedly went on for 21 hours. Some describe it as marathon talks. But why do you think the talks failed? What are your sentiments at this moment?
Well, it's great to be on your program, which I listen to and see very regularly. It's very instructive and informative. We in Pakistan have been at the center stage of global diplomacy in the last 1 week or so, particularly hosting the Iran-US talks, which raised a lot of expectations. And some of the expectations are still lingering, despite the fact that no agreement was arrived at. Basically, both sides seemed serious and sincere. They came with large delegations of experts. The delegations were led by the highest levels of political leadership in both countries. And the talks were substantive, and we were there to facilitate those talks. Basically, I feel that at the end of the day, perhaps there was something holding back the United States delegation. Maybe they didn't have the full mandate to really clinch a deal. Maybe the elephant in the room, as I call it, Israel was holding them because Mr. Netanyahu is the one who started this war and roped in Mr. Trump in it also. So I feel that Iranian side seemed quite ready for that. But the Americans then changed the goalposts and sometimes raised the bar as they felt it and gave some demands, which I don't think Iran could accept. But having said that, I think a window is still open, and that window remains because both sides are very keen to avert any conflict, any new war. And I don't think Mr. Trump has any appetite for a war, and neither has Iran for that matter.
So tell us a bit more about what you just said. For instance, you said there seems to be something that's holding back the US delegation. What gives you that impression, and what are you specifically referring to?
You see, because initially the situation and the issues were about the nuclear program of Iran. The Iranian should not build the bomb. And the Iranians have given an ironclad commitment. They are not building the bomb. They don't have the capacity to do so also. And this has been corroborated by the United States' own national security system, which last year said, and they reported that Iran has no capability to build the bombs. That's a common meeting ground. But now the US is saying there should be zero enrichment, for example. And they're also saying that Iran has about 460 kilograms of enriched uranium, which the US feels should be given to the United States. Now, under the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and Iran is a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, all countries have the right to enrich uranium for civilian, nuclear, peaceful purposes. And Iran is being denied that right. Then, secondly, also that the issue of Iran's role in the region that has been questioned. Lebanon, it's an ongoing situation. Iran mentioned in its 10 points about Lebanon. That was taken off the table, probably at the insistence of Israel. So that is also there. Iran is asking for compensation or assets not being frozen anymore. So that is also on the table. So, and then of course, the Strait of Hormuz issue, which has erupted as a consequence of the war. It is not the cause of the war. And I think that also needs to be tackled because that was not the original purpose for the whole thing.
You have actually pointed out several stumbling blocks, let's say. It seems that the differences are quite big. Would you say, to start with, the two sides had very little common ground to sit down and talk?
I wouldn't say that. I think there's more common ground because now they are coming to the conference table after having tried each other in a war. And that war has shown the limits of American power. That war has shown the limits of the so called might is right approach. So, given that context, given that element of this new realities in the region, I feel that there is more incentive for both sides to go for a peace process. For example, Iran has suffered a lot of death, destruction, and devastation, but Iran has remained defiant. So Iran has defied the odds. Iran is standing firm, and they have resisted American bullying and the bullying from Israel. Two nuclear powers willfully attacked a country which is relatively weak in terms of military strength compared to the US and Israel. The United States had big ambitions and goals of regime change, of destroying Iran's military might, and they failed in that context. So, given this context, I think that it's been a sobering experience for all of them. And in that relationship, I think a new war is no longer an option for them. And that is not going to be happening. So, I would say that there's more incentive to get a deal rather than not having a deal. And don't forget, this war has destroyed Mr. Trump's credibility at home. Politically, he has been weakened. His polling figures are low, and this is a very unpopular war. And in this context, Iran has the upper hand as of today, as we speak.
However, the situation seems to be very murky, especially on the part of the United States. If you look at the different statements that have come out of, for instance, President Trump concerning the basis, the workable basis of this negotiation, he, for instance, was retweeting the response from the Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi, which mentioned the 10-point plan, peace plan that's proposed by Iran. In the White House statement about the negotiations about the ceasefire, they also talked about, they said specifically, the White House said specifically that the 10-point peace plan proposed by Iran seems like a workable basis for the two sides to start negotiations. But then all of these seem to be totally thrown out of the window. And there were talks by, for instance, Vice President J.D. Vance, who led the U.S. delegation to Islamabad, seemed to say that, the 10-point proposal that everybody is talking about is different from the 10-point proposal that the U.S. or President Trump was talking about, that there are completely different two versions of it. What is your understanding? What exactly is the truth from your understanding, Senator?
My view is that there's only one version of the 10-point plan. That 10-point plan, as you rightly said, was tweeted, almost endorsed by Trump, or when he said that it is a workable basis for negotiations. And in those 10 points, if I read them correctly, Iran says end war on all fronts, including Lebanon. And then Lebanon was included. And suddenly we find that the day the talks
So
start.
sorry for interrupting here, Senator. Although President Trump tweeted about in the White House statement, they talked about the 10-point plan, and in Mr. Arakchi, the Iranian foreign minister's tweet about the ceasefire, the details of the 10-point plan were never officially publicized, except in a detailed statement that was released from the Supreme National Security Council of Iran. They talked about the content of the 10-point plan, but that plan looked very much unacceptable, I would say. Anybody with with a reasonable understanding of the situation would say that 10-point plan would like the U.S. total surrender to Iran. So we don't really know exactly what's the detail. What are the details of the 10-point plan? Do we?
I think we have a broad idea of the broad contours of the plan, and it's a restatement and reaffirmation of Iran's long-standing positions on a whole lot of issues, ranging from ending the war, ranging from Lebanon, ranging from what they call war reparations, and ranging from Strait of Hormuz and their right to have a peaceful nuclear program and so forth. So I think that it is not a classified document. It's a statement of Iranian perspective on their on different issues. Just like the Trump 15-point plan is an affirmation of American perspective on the issues that matter to them. So these are negotiating points. They were stated positions, and they were positions that have been put on the record.
So you think there is only one plan that the two sides are working on during their
I've
last
not heard
talks?
of any other version of the 10-point plan, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
And of course, now the Americans are talking differently. They said Lebanon is not part of that plan, and there were other, I think, mentions being made. But as far as the 10 points are concerned, that's very upfront, and that's very clear, and that's very consistent regarding the Iranian perspective. Now, they put it across on the table for discussion.
One thing that the Pakistani prime minister, your prime minister, said in his tweet announcing the negotiations, he talked about a ceasefire, and it was including Lebanon, right?
Yes.
And it was effective immediately. Somehow that was totally denied by Israel, who pounded Lebanon with the fiercest firepower since the war began, immediately after the announcement. So what happened? Did your prime minister send that tweet with the endorsement? Do you believe that this tweet had been endorsed, at least by Trump?
I wouldn't say that, because that was a tweet of the Pakistan prime minister, and the Pakistan prime minister tweets on his own without sending it for information of any other foreign country. It was an internal document issued by the government of Pakistan through the prime minister's office. So Trump would have probably have seen it after it was published, and it was our understanding of the situation. And there was certainly coordination with Iran, I would say, on that issue, because Pakistan was the one which invited Iran to join into the process, and the US also. But we were in close coordination with these two countries. But I don't think the tweet had the prior endorsement of Mr. Trump.
Because President Trump walked back from, we understand, people believe that he walked back from the agreement that he made with the Pakistani side as mediator, saying that the ceasefire included Lebanon. So we are wondering whether the Prime Minister of Pakistan tweeted what he tweeted with the, what he tweeted concerning the ceasefire with the agreement of both the US and the Iranians when it comes to Lebanon, whether Lebanon is part of the ceasefire. I don't know whether
more than the Pakistan Prime Minister's tweet, Trump's own tweet mentioning the 10-point plan, which is, as I mentioned, includes Lebanon, is a clear fact that what Pakistan tweeted had was within the knowledge of both the Iranians and the US in terms of the agenda. I'm talking of Lebanon particularly, because when Trump says that the 10-point plan of Iran is a workable basis for negotiations, the 10 points of Iran include Lebanon. And what Pakistan tweeted was that ceasefire includes Iran and Lebanon is more or less the same thing, of course, done separately.
So what you're saying, basically, had the ceasefire not included Lebanon, Iran wouldn't have agreed to sit down with the United States.
Yes, absolutely. For Iran, that is a very important thing, and it makes sense because we are talking of comprehensive peace. We can't compartmentalize peace, or we can't segment peace that, okay, peace in this part of the Middle East is fine, but let the war continue in the other part of the Middle East, and the source of the war is the same, namely Israel. So when we talk of peace, it's a comprehensive peace and it's all inclusive, not segmented or separate in any form.
Yes, I noticed the conclusive, the word conclusive in the tweet of your prime minister. What about the elephant in your room that you describe, which is Israel? We understand that Israel and Lebanon had the ambassador to the United States has some kind of telephone conversation, but they're not part of the negotiations that happened in Islamabad. So how is that part of the negotiation or that part of the puzzle being addressed? Do you think in order to have lasting and comprehensive peace, these Israel at least also have to be brought into the negotiations?
Because Lebanon is suffering the most after Iran. You know, the war started against Iran, and Lebanon became caught in the crossfire, so to speak, or it is what is termed in military parlance as collateral damage. They are a weaker link in the chain. They have a government and also some organizations like the Hezbollah, which have supported by Iran. So Israel could not take on Iran so directly, and they failed to do so. So they took it out on the poor Lebanese, occupying 15% of the territory and also making about 10% of the population of Lebanon homeless. So we feel strongly that Lebanon is suffering as a consequence of the Iran war, and that suffering should stop. Because we're talking of peace in the region, and peace includes all parts of the region.
So do you think for the negotiations to really yield some results, some positive outcome, eventually Israel would have to be brought into the discussion, if not directly at the table?
I think Israel is a proxy of the United States. When the US speaks to Iran or via Pakistan, it is also representing the interests of Israel. And Israel is very powerful in the United States, as you know. Their roles are inextricably intertwined because the Israeli lobby is a very powerful political lobby that functions in the United States on behalf of Israel. And that has a lot of clout and influence in the American political system for decades on end.
Right.
So we know about that. So the two are not separate. The two are the same. Israel and the US, that is.
President Donald Trump threatened a U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. He said, effective immediately, the U.S. Navy will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. What is your reaction to that? Can we take what he says here seriously?
Well, you can't take Mr. Trump so seriously all the time, what he says at least, because sometimes there's a lot of bluff, there's a lot of bluster, there's a lot of bombast, and then there's a quick turnaround. And basically, he did it 24 hours before the ceasefire with Iran. He announced that he was going to wipe out the Iranian civilization. And then he did a quick U-turn. Regarding the Strait of Hormuz, I am at a loss to understand the logic behind it. This seems so convoluted logic that you want to block and blockade the Strait of Hormuz in order to open the Strait of Hormuz when it was already open when the war began. 28th of February, it was already open. And they say we are going to blockade that because we want to open the Strait of Hormuz. That reminds me of the logic of the American army 30, 40 years ago in Vietnam when I was a student in America at Georgetown University. I remember an American army officer saying after destroying some villages in Vietnam, we have to destroy the village in order to save the village. I mean, this is almost comical. So this is the same logic they're saying we have to blockade the Strait of Hormuz in order to open the Strait of Hormuz when the Strait of Hormuz was already open when the war began. So this doesn't make sense. This is just to pressure Iran. It's a kind of escalation which will not be in the Americans' control anyway. They tried the air war, they failed. Now they're trying to do it on the naval front. I think it's also a tried, tested, and failed formula, in my view.
What will it take for the American delegation to agree to come back to Islamabad?
I think the American delegation needs a reality check, for starters. We don't live in the 19th century. Gunboat diplomacy is not going to work. This is not the age of the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, that you could use your naval armada and then blockade countries or bully countries or regulate countries. It's not possible. So I think it's very important that the sense be retained. I expect that Trump will do a U-turn sooner or later because he realizes that this is an unwinnable war without end. He is caught in a quagmire in Iran and he has to extricate himself from the quagmire. And mind you, the history of America in Asia is very clear. America has never won a land war in Asia. Korea, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Iraq. So, and Iran is a different cup of tea. It's no Venezuela. So let's be very clear. The US needs that peace badly. So does Iran, of course, and so does the region. But for US, the stakes are very high because it claims to be a superpower, but that halo and that mystique and that image of the superpower has been shattered in the last 43 days.
Well, to at least, because judging from all the erratic things that have happened under the second Trump administration, somehow people were not so surprised by by the level of confusion, let me put it this way, that we're seeing coming from the White House and from the US president. But what about the mediator job that Pakistan has taken on? First of all, what are the unique advantages that Pakistan possess as a mediator? Do you see Pakistan continue to play this role despite the challenges? And yeah, what is the biggest challenge for your country, for your prime minister to continue to conduct shuttle diplomacy between the two sides?
The biggest challenge is the trust deficit between Tehran and Washington. Tehran is ready for a deal, but they don't trust Washington and they don't trust Israel. Rightly so, because the US has imposed 2 wars on Iran based on deception, deceit, and lies. So that's understandable. And now coming to your other question, what makes Pakistan unique in this regard? First of all, our track record and our credibility. 50 years ago, we were the bridge between Washington and Beijing. In July 1971, Dr. Henry Kissinger, President Nixon's national security advisor, flew in a secret plane of Pakistan International Airlines from Islamabad to Beijing, carrying a message which changed the global balance of power in the 20th century and brought about American-Chinese rapprochement. So we have a track record. We did the same during the Afghan war years. We brought the Afghan Taliban and the Americans together, and we served as a bridge. So we have a track record. Secondly, we are a stakeholder for peace, security, and stability in the region. We have a 900-kilometer border with Iran. Iran is a very close brotherly neighbor of Pakistan, like China, for example. And so whatever happens in Iran has a fallout in the region, including Pakistan. Thirdly, we are in a unique position because we have a very good outreach at the same time with Washington, also with the President Trump's administration. That is important. And finally, we are also now a sort of a net security provider in the region, in the broader Middle East region, where Pakistani troops are there in Saudi Arabia. Pakistan is playing a role for stability. We are the only nuclear power in the Muslim world. We are a member of the UN Security Council right now. So for a whole lot of reasons, Pakistan is uniquely placed, and we also have excellent relations with China, which is a time-tested friend and close ally. We have a close relationship and rapport with Saudi Arabia, with the Gulf Arab states, with Turkey as well, and also with Russia. So given all these contexts, Pakistan was uniquely placed. And we pulled off, I think, almost a near miracle because we brought together the two protagonists, US and Iran, stopped their fighting, averted the catastrophe that was looming thanks to the Mr. Trump's threats, and then we brought them at the conference table, sitting across each other, even shaking hands, face to face, even smiling, and talking for the first time since 79 when the Islamic Revolution in Iran took place. So that's a huge achievement. And we got them talking together in the same room for 21 hours straight on with all the experts jotting down notes. So it was a very serious, sustained, and substantive discussion. And I'm very sorry to say that it was scuttled at the last moment because of Israel's influence and because Mr. Trump pulled out the vice president at that moment when we were close to a deal.
Yeah, you again mentioned a very interesting scene, you know, the three sides in the same room, if I understand correctly, for 21 hours as a marathon talks, right?
Yes, absolutely. And they're exchanging notes, they're talking to each other, they're not shooting at each other, they're even smiling, they're even shaking hands. So, this has not happened between the US and Iran for the last 47 years. So it was a huge psychological barrier that we broke through. Courtesy Pakistan.
It's quite amazing to fathom that, knowing how much trust or how little trust there is on the Iranian side, right? Basically, they negotiated with the Americans with a lot of faith, and Trump came and just tore that up, the JCPOA, right?
Yes.
And then last year when they were negotiating, bombs dropped, and this year again in the middle. So it's really beyond me that that anybody would still believe that negotiating with the Americans is really a sane thing to do, because either you're in the middle of it, or when you're very close to it, or you have done it, they can just walk away, and there is no accountability. There is no consequence to that.
Yes, I think that's very important, and that's why Pakistan, not just Pakistan alone, but friends like China, Turkey, they played a very key role in pushing Iran towards coming to the conference table, because Iran rightly has reservations and strong reservations. As you mentioned, their track record of America is very poor vis-a-vis Iran. They backed out of a signed international agreement. They used the pretext and ploy of talks to prepare for war twice, and then they assassinated their leadership also. This is really an act of thuggishness in international relations. But I must say that the Iranians have been very pragmatic, very positive, and they came with an open mind to negotiate and try to clinch deal. And they would have, but for, I think, the influence of Mr. Netanyahu and the hawks around Mr. Trump, perhaps, who are swaying his thinking in the wrong direction.
Would you give us some more detail, because there are talks, reports about at the last moment the Iranians lost their trust again, or they said they couldn't trust the Americans. Was there a point after which the talks collapsed? Because you said it seemed that they were taking notes, they were talking to each other, they probably looked at each other in the eyes as well. I don't know. I do not know. I hope so. But was there a turning point in the talks from your knowledge?
I would say that basically the American delegation led by Vice President J.D. Vance did not have the full mandate or authority to really clinch a deal or sign on a acceptable deal, because Trump is the boss and he likes to take credit for these things. And he says, okay, if there's going to be a deal, he'd like to take credit for that. So certainly, because there was talk of a second round to continue after a pause in the discussions, because the discussions were going on for a marathon, a period of 21 hours, and people also needed some rest and respite before they could resume afresh. So while waiting for that, suddenly Mr. Vance had a press conference early in the morning and announced they were flying back. So I feel that perhaps he did not have the full mandate and authority, and maybe it was Israel calling the shots from behind, or Trump didn't want Vance to take all the credit. for some reasons, even the Iranian president has tweeted, President Pezeshkian, they were close to a deal, they were nearing a deal when the Americans pulled out all of a sudden.
Do you expect more negotiations to take place in Islamabad in the near future, Senator?
I expect more negotiations to take place. I think between now and 22nd of April, when the deadline expires for the ceasefire, there'll be telephone calls being made and there'll be capitals calling. And I feel that the time has come for China also to play a very important diplomatic role, because China has a tremendous clout and China could be a potential guarantor for peace, because the Iranians don't trust the Americans and they feel that the Americans cannot be taken at their word. The Americans turn around, ditch what they've said, and then suddenly walk away. So you need a firm guarantee, or maybe China working under the United Nations framework with Pakistan and with other small group of countries. I think we could still clinch a deal, because I don't think Trump has an appetite for armed conflict, and Trump knows that any continuation of war in the second round would be politically fatal for him and disastrous for the United States of America.
Has the potential role of China came up during the negotiations, to your knowledge, or has the Iranian side made any specific reference, concerning what role China is expected to play?
No, not in the talks, because the talks were mostly bilateral or trilateral, Pakistan spearheading it. I'm talking of the future, that now that after the first round of talks in Islamabad, we have both sides have sized each other up. They know where the problem lies, and to push and take it forward. I think the Chinese role could be very, very positive and productive. And so would be the role of Saudi Arabia, for example, from the Muslim countries. So those countries which are significant, which are key, and Turkey, I would say China, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, they could be key stakeholders in the next round, along with Pakistan, to clinch a deal, which I think was near at hand and is still near at hand, because deep down, both sides want to avert war, which is a common basis to resume negotiations.
All right, we have to leave it there. We literally ran out of time, but it's been a fascinating conversation. A lot of details you provided. Thank you so much for sharing with us your
Thank you, my
valuable
pleasure.
insights.
Thank you.